Hi everybody, my name is Eleanor Parker. I'm going to be your moderator today. I'd like to welcome you to the second webinar for the Lean Construction Ireland, Construction Client Forum and Construction Academia Forum. I'm going to pass you over in a moment to one of our LCI core group representatives who's going to introduce the topic and the speaker. Firstly, some logistics. If you do have a question for us, please note that you're muted, we can't hear you. So you can type it in the webinar. You have a questions box. We will consolidate all of these questions and we'll ask them to Ralph in the second half of the webinar. If we do have any questions that don't get answered today, we'll make sure to answer these and send them out after the webinar. There will also be a survey at the end. It's just 5 questions. Please do fill this out. It's important to ensure that we are continuously learning and improving our webinars as we go. So please just do give us your feedback at the end of the webinar. It shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. Our agenda today will be as follows. Kevin White is going to do the introduction. Then Ralph Montague is going to do his presentation for 30 minutes. And then we'll move to about 20-25 minutes of Q&A questions and then the survey at the end. So I'm now going to pass you over to Kevin White.
Hello everyone, it's Kevin White. Just firstly, what I'd like to do is try and get a little bit of feedback at the end. So as Eddie mentioned there, if you give your feedback on the webinar, it'll only take 1 or 2 minutes at the end, again for continuous improvement. I'm an LCI core group member and I'm currently sitting on the LCI community of practice and which links in with the client forum and academia forum. For today's webinar, the title is BIM for Lean Construction, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about. The speaker is Ralph. Ralph comes with over 20 years experience in managing large projects as a registered architect. He's a managing partner of ArcDocs Specialist BIM Consultancy. He's also a chairman of the RIAI and a coordinator with the CETA BIM group. He's and adoption of BIM and has recently been appointed to the board of the National BIM Council of Ireland. Ralph is also a part-time lecturer in Trinity and represents the RIAI on the Architects Council of Europe. So we're delighted to have such a prestigious speaker with us today, and I'd like to now pass you over to Ralph to start the presentation.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you to Lean Construction Ireland for this opportunity to present to you today. Sorry, just skip the screen. So today we're going to talk all about BIM, or Building Information Modeling, and how it applies to lean construction. Kevin introduced me already, so I'll just skip over this. But just wanted to say our company, ArcDocs, have been working with project teams and businesses and individuals for the last 7 years to help implement BIM through consultancy, production, support and training services. So hopefully we can bring some of that experience to the discussion today. So in simple terms, BIM is about information about buildings or built infrastructure. And I think we can all agree that without information, nothing happens. You can't build anything without information, you can't maintain or operate anything, you can't even transact in buildings without information. So information is very important. It has value and it's an asset that should be carefully considered and looked after. I think we can also all agree that the quality of information affects performance and outcome. So if you have good quality information, things normally go well, and if you have poor quality information, things usually don't go so well. So I suppose that brings me on to how do you define quality information? I mean, I would define it as information that is digital. In other words, it's information that can be used and reused by many people. It's searchable, it's accessible, it's accurate, and it's useful. In other words, you have it in time and it's ready to be used when you get it. So I don't think many people would disagree with those points either. The problem is building information as we know it in the construction industry today is the exact opposite of what I've just said. It's predominantly paper-based. It's very difficult to search or query. It's highly unlikely that it's accurate because of the way it's produced and when it's produced. And in its static format, it's very difficult to keep it up to date. And very quickly the information becomes redundant. And things don't have to be that way. We live in the digital information age, and in other areas of life we've just come to appreciate and expect better ways of working with information. So when you want to book your next holiday, for instance, you don't want to sit in the travel agents on a Saturday morning paging through a printed copy of the flight schedule of every airline that flies to your destination. You want to go online, enter your destination, push a button, and immediately present it with the most accurate, latest flight information from a number of airlines, a number of price options from different travel agents. You want to make a selection, you want to put in your credit card details, and you want confirmation straight away that your seat is booked. That's just how we expect to work with information in other areas of life. But in construction, if you want to find out something about a building, you've got to go and spend half a day in a storeroom full of lever arch files, paging through stuff, and even if you found the information, you probably wouldn't trust that it's the latest or most accurate information. So you end up going to survey the thing anyway. So I suppose today is about how do we bring construction into this digital information age. When you look at the information asset, and when we talk about an asset information model, we're not talking just about a three-dimensional model. We're talking about graphical detail, non-graphical detail, and documents. And when you look at the life cycle of information, what happens is during the delivery phase, a lot of time and money is spent sort of putting together this information, producing it, collating it, etc. Some of it during design stage, quite a lot of it during construction stage. But then when you hand over all this information to the building owner or the operator, the information enters the cycle of continuously degrading and depleting because it's in a static format that can't be kept up to date, and it goes missing, etc. Now obviously this isn't an ideal situation for any building owner, and many sort of more informed owners are now beginning to implement digital information strategies based on international best practice in asset management, or ISO 55000, which requires a sort of an information management strategy. And the whole purpose of the strategy is to turn the tide on this information and make sure it's continuously upgrading and increasing. Now obviously, the sooner you move that line towards the beginning of the process, the less it's going to cost you. In fact, if you can move that line right to the beginning, it'll cost you nothing because people have to produce the information anyway. You're just asking them to do it in accordance with your strategy. The value that having a digital information strategy would bring to your project is obviously highest the sooner you can move that line to the beginning of the project. Now it's interesting to me that a lot of the discussion around BIM is it's usually amongst designers in the design stage, and rightly so. I suppose a lot of the discussion around lean is around construction stage, but nobody really seems to be taking a holistic view of the life cycle of the information asset. The problem starts with the way in which we produce information in our industry. It's predominantly paper-based, even though we're using a lot of technologies like CAD and Excel, etc. At the point of exchanging the information with other people, it's usually printed on paper, and that's the copy that you get to work with. So we're talking about multiple documents that have to be manually produced, manually coordinated. There's a lot of duplication of effort between all the different types of documents. There's a lot of abortive work. There's excessive checking. It's prone to human error. It's labor intensive. It's costly, and it's time consuming. So it's problematic to start with. But we have another problem. We work in a very very fragmented industry, broadly broken down into planning, design, construction, and operations. But there's so many stakeholders involved in projects, all of which have their own business interests and their own way of doing things. And this ends up creating a complicated series of transactions of information between all these parties at different stages of the project, to the point where the collective knowledge or intelligence of the building information that's being produced is almost impossible to get to, because it's stored in different places and on different companies' servers and different people's PCs, or even some of it in people's heads. So I suppose the vision of BIM is that we'd get to the point one day that we could describe one building by one database of information, and that people would be required to input information into that database as you go through the cycle of projects. And when you're looking for something, you would just go to that database and you get the latest and greatest information. So I say that's the vision of BIM. We're not quite there yet, but yeah, that's where it's going. For those of you who haven't come across BIM before, but basically BIM is a process of building a virtual building in software. You literally assemble the building from objects that represent their real-life counterparts. And the important point here is it's not just 3D geometry. Every object is a container or placeholder, if you like, of all the information about that component of the building in a digital format. And the immediate benefit, obviously, of working in this way is that you have this virtual building and everybody can look around it, walk around it, make sure things are going to work and fit, and have a full appreciation of what the building is. Now, you can still get the traditional outputs from a BIM process, such as drawings and details and schedules, etc. But the important point here is that these aren't drawings that are manually drafted. These are views that are extracted or derived from the model. So the usefulness of BIM is that you only put the information in once into the model, and if you need to make a change, you only make the change once in the model itself. And every document or that's derived or extracted is automatically updated. So it's a far more efficient way of producing information and an easier way of working. Now I want to make the point that you don't sort of add BIM to a traditional process. You don't say we're going to do the project, we're going to add BIM. Basically, it's an alternative methodology. The traditional process is where the intellectual and productive input goes into producing multiple documents, whereas in BIM, the methodology is to, the intellectual and productive input goes into building the virtual building. Now, you can still derive the documents from that process, but the one is a very time-consuming and costly process, as we've said, and the other is a far more efficient way of producing better quality information. And the reason I'm sort of laboring this point is because we've seen over the last few years a lot of people practice what I would call pseudo-BIM, and that's where they continue to develop the designs in the traditional methodology, and in the corner of the office somewhere they got some poor guy trying to frantically convert everything back to a model. And now obviously if you do BIM that way, you've just taken a process that is slow and time-consuming and costly and added something on top of it. Whereas if you do BIM properly, it's going to be more efficient and achieve savings. So I would say watch out for pseudo-BIM on projects, and there's a lot more of that happening than you would imagine. In 2011, the UK government set out a strategy to make BIM mandatory on all public projects by 2016. So that's in play now. And in that strategy, they defined different levels of BIM maturity. Level 0 being just CAD, level 1 being a mixture of 2D and 3D, but following some standards. Level 2 is where each discipline or supplier is working in BIM, but in a separate model which can be federated together. And level 3 is the nirvana I spoke about earlier, where you have one database of information, so an integrated database or collection of databases that people are feeding information into. Now, for contractual and insurance reasons, we can't do level 3 yet. So if anybody says they're doing level 3, beware. But the UK government, I suppose, already working on their level 3 strategies through a program called Digital Built Britain, so that's worth following. The important point here is that all of this is focused around standards, and we're going to talk a little bit about standards later. So just graphically, what does that look like? At level 2, you have separate discipline models. Each discipline is using their model to produce their documentation, but you can bring those models together in what's called the federated model. And in this federated model environment, you can check that everything's going to work and fit together, and software will even automatically find clashes between items within your model. So the whole 3D coordination becomes a lot more easier to do. Now that you have this virtual model, you can do things which you couldn't really do before. You can link every object in the model to your construction program and carry out visual sequencing to look at issues of logistics, health and safety, etc. in this virtual environment, so you can resolve issues far earlier. That's called 4D BIM. You can link every object in the model to a cost database and let computers do what computers do really well, which is count stuff quickly and accurately. But it means you need estimators that know how to work with model information, or 5D BIM. You can analyze this virtual building. You can analyze it for structural analysis. You can analyze it for energy performance. And the whole point of analysis is to try and optimize the design and come up with the best solution and test multiple iterations of the design before you build it. And lastly, in this environment, you can capture all the information that the facilities managers and operators will need to effectively operate their building in the future, such as maintenance periods, warranty periods, everything like that. So that's called 7D BIM. So those are the different dimensions of BIM, or the different uses of BIM, if you like. I think it's useful to take a minute to talk about what your clients want. Construction clients want better outcomes on their projects. And by better outcomes, I mean they want better buildings, built quicker and built cheaper. And it's interesting when you look at the UK Construction 2025 targets, you know, that they've said that they want to have 50% better performing buildings, and they're going to measure that by the amount of carbon they emit, so 50% less carbon. They want buildings to be delivered 50% quicker, and they want buildings to be delivered 33% cheaper. Now, whether you agree with those targets or not, I suppose the important point for us in Ireland is if the UK and other markets are striving towards those targets, and we're not, we're very quickly going to become uncompetitive. From a client's point of view, the first thing they want to really understand is what is it that they're getting? What is the building going to look like? Will it suit their needs, etc. So they want to understand the scope. They obviously want to understand when they're going to get it, with the time. They want to understand how much it's going to cost. They're really interested in quality. Is it going to be well designed, well constructed? How much will it be to maintain and operate? Clients are really interested in getting value for money, and ultimately clients are interested in certainty. For most clients, building or constructing buildings is not their core business, so they want their risks to be effectively managed by the professional teams that they employ. Now you might say, if that's what clients want, what's this got to do with BIM? Well, the 3D aspects of BIM, the fact that you have this virtual building and you can take clients around the building, and it gives everybody a much better understanding of the scope of the project. The 4D aspects of BIM, or sequencing and logistics, etc., give everyone a much better understanding of the time. The 5D aspects of BIM in terms of quantity takeoff and cost checking gives everybody a much better understanding of the costs. The 6D aspects of BIM, or the analysis, be it structural analysis or energy analysis, etc., is all to do with achieving better quality buildings. And the 7D aspects of BIM is also a quality issue, in my opinion. It's about giving digital, accessible, accurate data about the building to clients at the end to help them maintain and operate their buildings. Okay. So I can tell you this from our experience. Clients don't want BIM as such. What they really want is all the things that BIM can offer. And I suppose clients are just expecting more and more that the project teams that they employ would offer this to them. But ultimately they want better buildings, built quicker and built cheaper. And you might have a discussion about whether that's even possible. I suppose the traditional response to that is you can't have all three. If you want something better, you have to pay more for it, or you have to spend more time at it. And I suppose that sort of thinking is based on the incorrect assumption that you can't do anything about the process. So what we're talking about today is improving the way we do things and cutting out a lot of waste and making the whole process far more lean. And if you do that, then obviously you can convert some of that waste back into quality and value. And there's a lot of waste in design and construction. And I won't read through this whole list of things, or you can read through it yourself, but what I will say is every one of those things is happening on projects all the time, and every one of those things costs a lot of money. But not one of those things adds any value to the building itself. So therefore, by definition, all of that is waste. And organizations that measure these kind of things, like the Lean Construction Institute, for instance, would say that over 30% of the cost of construction is waste. And that's amazing to me that as an industry, as designers would be haggling for a 1% increase in the design fee, or as contractors we might be haggling for a 1% increase in profit margins. but nobody seems to be doing anything about this enormous percentage of waste. But personally, I don't think clients want to pay for that waste. They'd far prefer to convert some of that waste back into more value or more quality. And at the root of all those things listed on the left-hand side there is poor quality information. And that's why we feel BIM is going to have such a significant impact. It's not everything, but it's going to have a big impact on lean construction. Another way to look at this is where we spend money in construction. You know, for every euro we spend in design, we spend about 20 euros in construction and about 60 euros in maintaining and operating buildings. I like to turn that around and say, you know, if we just spent a little bit of extra time at the beginning in the design phase, getting the building right in this virtual building environment, you know, coordinating the design, resolving any issues before we go to construction, and going to construction with digital data that the contractors can immediately use and process without having to spend weeks printing out drawings and marking them up with highlighting pens, then we should avoid a lot of the waste that typically happens during construction and get about 20 euros of value in the construction phase. And by designing buildings and testing them in this environment with performance in mind, and also handing over useful, digital, accurate, accessible data to the operators, you should get about 60 euros of value in the operation phase. So, the key message there is the right time to invest in this process and BIM is as early as possible in the design stage, because that's where you would get the highest return on that investment. So I hope that short introduction gives you an idea that BIM is a far more efficient way of working, and therefore, it's a lean method of producing, managing, and exchanging information that fits perfectly into the whole lean construction philosophy. And no matter what your role is on a project, you need information to do your job, and in doing your job, you're producing information that other people will need to do their job. So, and to make good decisions and to get good performance, you need good quality information. And going back to my earlier definition, that's information that's digital, searchable, accessible, accurate, timely, and ready to use. And if we just quickly look at the principles of lean construction and how that might apply to producing, managing, and exchanging information, and where we might achieve a lot of savings or reductions in waste, just in transport, in exchanging information, digital information versus paper information avoids a lot of duplication and effort. In inventory, the way we use information and store information, and the ability to reuse information for future projects, etc., is far easier in a digital environment than it is in a paper environment. In terms of motion and moving people around, with this virtual building and the physical and the model, you can actually use a lot of technology such as immersive web meetings and bring the expertise into the model from all around the world, if you like, versus people having to meet in a meeting room with a printed copy of paper drawings. So there's a lot of potential savings there. Updating information. We all know that the designs change and buildings have to be updated. As I said earlier, if you make a change in BIM, you make the change once, and that change is automatically reflected in all the documents that are extracted or derived from that change, whereas waiting for that change to be reflected in the manual process it would take far longer. Processing information. Now, if you receive digital information versus receiving paper-based documents, and I would count PDF files as paper-based documents because you can't process them. You still have to print them and read them with your eyes. So, but if you receive digital data, you can immediately use it, immediately process it, and get on with your job. In the traditional way of working, we see too much information being produced too early by the wrong types of people, and it results in a lot of rework. And I think BIM offers many opportunities for the earlier engagement of the people who know how to construct and fabricate stuff. In terms of defects, this idea of building the building twice and resolving the design issues and coordination issues in the virtual environment rather than doing that on site much later on in the process would save enormous amounts of money. And you know, we have highly skilled people in the construction industry, but too much of their time is being spent, you know, working through mundane manual-based or paper-based processes. So I think BIM offers many opportunities to get rid of the mundane stuff and let people do what they're really good at. So a question that maybe we can raise in the question and answer time, you know, for the lean construction community is, you know, do you think lean can work properly without BIM? I mean, I know it's been working without BIM, but I think BIM really brings a lot to the discussion. So what's the catch? You know, it all sounds good. There is a catch, unfortunately, and this is the fact. Everything I've said up to now is not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen unless there's a clearly defined managed process put in place that requires every participant to make their contribution to the project in this way. So, you know, we need a standard way of working. And just to say something quick about standards, you know, standards are the reason things work properly. If I go back to my earlier example of booking your holiday online, you know, the reason that works so well and it's so seamless almost is because of a standard called HTML. Now, as a user of the internet, I don't want to know the technical details of HTML. I just want to use it and it must work for me. But if you're a web designer making applications, you know, you need to understand everything about the standards. And in the same way, as designers and contractors move from a paper-based environment to digital design and construction and BIM, you know, the clients don't necessarily want to understand the technical details of standards, but the designers and the contractors really have to understand the standards if they want things to work well. You know, from a client's point of view, they just want an easy BIM button. Like the internet, they just want it to work. Another thing to think about when you talk about BIM and standards is that BIM is both a process and a deliverable. I mean, building information modeling is a verb and it's something we do. Building information model is a noun. It's something we provide. It's the deliverable. So we need standards that cover both the process and the deliverable. I won't spend too much time on this, but you know, for the process, you know, we've got all the standards that are coming out of the UK, which cover the information management processes during the capital delivery phase, operational phase, handover, etc. And in terms of the deliverable, there's already international standards for data schemas, classifications, definitions, etc. So I suppose the point is we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Everything's there. The British standards on process are currently becoming ISO standards, and the Uniclass classification system that they've developed in the UK it complies with the ISO standard for data classification. COBE, which is an information exchange format for facilities management, which is an end deliverable, complies with the ISO standards. There's standards for data security, and all of this is being driven by international best practice for asset management, or ISO 55000. So, you know, all the standards are there, all the guidance are there from the UK, you know, it's all been developed for us. We just have to start using it, is a key point. I wanted to spend just a few minutes on this particular standard because I think this is the one that will apply to most people in design and construction, but it's a specification for information management for the capital delivery phase. It requires a few key things to happen. It requires the client to produce what's called an EIR, or Employer's Information Requirement. It requires people to be pre-qualified for their capability to participate in the project through a series of questions in PAS 91. It requires a few commercial things to happen. There has to be a contract, so there's a BIM protocol that is appended to everybody's appointment or contract. Somebody has to be put in charge, a project information manager for both design stage and construction stage, and there's an outlined scope of service for that. There's some issues of PI insurance to deal with. A digital plan of work has to be put together to set out who's going to deliver what information, when they're going to deliver it, and what level of detail and information is going to be there. That's called the digital plan of work, and in the UK they've developed a handy free tool that you can use to do that. When you're tendering on a project, whether you're a designer or a contractor or supplier, you have to produce what's called a pre-contract BIM execution plan, which is a document that sets out how you're going to respond to the employer's information requirement. And the contents of all these documents are actually specified in PAS 11922. You also have to provide BIM capability assessments as part of your tender. Once you get appointed, the project team together will put together what's called a post-contract BIM execution plan, where the whole team together sets out how they're going to deliver on the employer's information requirements. You have to set up a common data environment, a central repository for all project information, which is carefully managed and controlled. And ultimately, the employer's information requirement will define the BIM deliverables, which will include COBE, which is the exchange for FM, or facilities management. It will include classifications such as unit class and possibly soft landings, which would keep the design team or construction team on board for a couple of years into the project to help people use the building properly. So that's what the standard sets out. At first it might look complicated, but I suppose I'd say keep calm. It's really not rocket science, and in fact lots of that is what we should be doing anyway if you're doing good project management or good design coordination. So you'll be documenting the requirements and responsibilities. We're probably doing that already in the employer's information requirements or the digital plan of work. We document how the team is going to deliver through the BIM execution plan. We're making it contractual through the BIM protocol. We're putting someone in charge, an overall project information manager, and individual task team information managers for each discipline. We're checking that everyone's capable through capability assessments. We're keeping all the information in a central, well-organized place, the common data environment. We're making sure all the data is well structured through COBE, IFC, unit class, etc. And rule number one, make sure nobody is practicing pseudo-BIM on the projects, because it just causes problems. So there's a couple of acronyms you need to learn and get used to there, but it's quite simple. If you follow those 8 steps, you'll achieve a good BIM project. There's lots of tools available to help. The Royal Institute of Architects in Ireland have put together 2 template documents to assist employers to help to write their EIRs and also assist project teams to write their BIM execution plans. In the UK, the NBS have made available a free toolkit online which helps you develop your digital plan of work. The Construction Industry Council in the UK have got the BIM protocol document. They've got the scope of service for information management and guidance on PI insurance, and the Construction Project Information Committee have a number of templates that you can use, and specifically the BIM capability assessment forms. And what I would say on the last item there is, you don't have to wait until the next tender comes out and for the BIM requirements. You can take these forms and you can begin to assess your company for its capability and begin filling the gaps before the tender comes out, because you know what the questions are going to be. And when you look at all these things that we've just briefly covered and the things you need to know to be BIM level 2 compliant, you realize very quickly that very little of this has to do with software. Some of it does, but it's mostly a project management issue. But the last 2 things, the ability to receive, open, navigate, query, analyze BIM data, you can do that with free software. So for many people in the industry, if you're not producing software, if you're just using it, you can use free, easy-to-use tools. But obviously the last item, for those who are producing information and managing information, you do need a new set of skills and a new set of tools to do that. So in summary, I hope that's given you a good overview that BIM is a process, not software. It's about creating and sharing information in a more streamlined way. It's about improving the collaboration and communication and getting better quality information to try and reduce some of the risk and waste in construction. In other words, we want better outcomes. And it's all about the information, or the I in BIM, and how that's used by different stakeholders. Just briefly, if anybody needs help with this, as I mentioned earlier, ArcDocs have been providing services to project teams, consultancy services, production services, training, and support services directly on projects or just for if your company wants to implement them, please contact us. And I just wanted to take one slide to let everybody know about the Construction IT Alliance, which has really become the meeting place for BIM in Ireland, if you like. The Alliance is a not-for-profit organization which has been promoting the use of IT in construction for over 12 years now. There's about 20 industry stakeholder groups that are represented. There's about 6,000 members on our LinkedIn group. We've been having a series of breakfast meetings for the last 5 years, specifically on BIM, and annual conferences. We've recently established 9 regional groups around the country to try and get the message and help people upskill in that area. There's an annual conference coming up in November. CETA have also been appointed by Enterprise Ireland to do some research around Ireland's capability around this area, and more recently they've established a National BIM Council. So with that, we could go to questions. You there, Kevin?
Yeah, thanks a million, Ralph. That's an excellent presentation. We've had a number of questions in, not specifically for you, Ralph. It's more or less around whether we're sharing the presentation, which we are. We're planning to share that with everyone. Also the recording, we are recording this session as part of the webinar, so that will be shared with everyone also, so they can get the full information. There was another question, again, not specifically for Ralph, regarding does the LCI provide courses for learning in applying BIM? We do have a starter pack on our website, which we'll go to. Maybe, Ralph, if you could go to the next slide, please, and the one after. So our next webinar is on the 31st of August. The information that people will be looking for is on that slide there as seen. So you can check in with us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and if you're looking for more information on our website, you can actually get information. Some more information coming through on questions was excellent presentation covered, and people very happy with the information. And just maybe one quick question that's come in very quickly there, Ralph, is do you think the processes which are described in PAS 1192 are sufficiently detailed, or would 1 or 2 more levels of detail be useful? That's a question that's just come in there, Ralph.
Okay. Yeah, what I would say about the standard, I mean, it's trying to apply to all types of projects, so it is quite generic, and I think you do. The point of the standard is that it's asking you to sit down at the beginning of a project and write these documents. So I think that's where the detail for the project will come. When the client sits down and writes their employer's information requirement, you'll go into more detail, or when the project team sits down and writes their BIM execution plan, that's where you'll go into more detail. So the standard is trying to be quite broad and able to apply to any type of project, but I think the team has to sit down and come up with the detail, if you like. If that makes sense. Project specific. Just to maybe make a point on the training as well. But people might not know this, but CETA offer a lot of subsidized training. So CETA have a skill nets which is government subsidized training. So you might have a look at that for people who are looking for training.
Thanks for that, Ralph. One more question that's just come in there in regards to where should an enterprise start implementing Lean or BIM? A very broad question, I know, but maybe if you could just give us a minute on that, Ralph.
Yeah, well, I'd say the first place you should start is with the Lean Construction Institute of Ireland and CETA. Now, between those two organisations are to give advice and guidance, and they're putting on events. I mean, both organisations are putting on great events for industry to learn to understand what Lean is all about, what BIM is all about, and to get further information. So that's the starting point, is to connect with these organizations. And the other thing I would say is, we live in the information age. There is so much information on the internet. I suppose it's just a question of trying to get the right information. On the BIM, I mean, I'll let you answer the one on the lean side, Kevin, but on the BIM side, yeah, I would definitely take those 8 points that I had on the one slide and get the standards, the relevant standards, work through them for your company, get the template documents and customize them for your company. And then obviously there's going to be some upskilling within your company required. As I said earlier, not everybody has to know everything, not everybody has to use expensive software or anything, but look at your company, look at who needs to know what, and you have to just start the journey. It is a journey, and like any journey, you just got to know where you are, set up the way you want to be, and start going. You can't wait really. I don't know if you want to say something about the lean.
Well, yeah, it's the same applies in lean. You have to start the journey somewhere. I suppose there is information available, and we try to point people in the right direction through our website or at our events. So if you are looking to start from scratch, there's lots of information on the internet. There's lots of information out there on lean. But if you are starting the journey from a lean perspective, you do need to look at your company, whether it be small or large, and then you have to get commitment for people to start the journey. Again, you can start small. You can be in small pockets, or you can actually grow that within the company as you go, or you can employ leaders in lean within your company to try and spread the word and to try and bring people up to speed with it. So once you make the initial start, all the information is out there. It's all available. So once you make the initial start, there's lots of people out there who want to help people to get on the right track. I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to take one more question because we have a lot of them starting to flood in, and just to make people aware that we will be answering all the questions. If we don't answer them in the webinar, we'll be following up and emailing the individuals and emailing the answers to their questions to everyone, so we can follow up with that. But I'll just take one more. There's one more here saying in other countries in Europe, Ralph, they have more integrated standards that focus on information rather than the process, and the question is, are they not relevant?
No, absolutely. The information standards that I mentioned in one of those slides are very relevant, and in fact they were already ISO standards. I think, but you need both. BIM is both a process and a deliverable. So if you just focus on the deliverable and don't focus on how to get there, I think that's a problem. So I think what's been really good in the UK is they recognise the international standards, and they've added to that, I suppose, something around the process, so it becomes a much broader package. That helps you to get there, get to the deliverable. Okay. I might have a quick question for you, Kevin, if you don't mind.
Just if I can just stop you there for a sec. So I'm conscious that I want to just try and wrap up and thank everybody. We're sort of running. We're down to the last couple of minutes on the webinar. What I'd like to do is just maybe, I'm sorry to cut you off there, Ralph. I'm sure I'll follow up with that question after. So just wanted to thank from the LCI and the COP, CCF, and CAF. I'd like to thank personally, I'd like to thank yourself, Ralph, for giving your time to do this. I'd also like to thank Eleanor for moderating for us and setting up the webinar. I think it's gone very well, and we're getting lots of good information in from people. And the whole point of having this is to get the information out there to everyone. And that's the whole reason for having a community of practice, is that we can share the information. So I'd ask people to give 1 or 2 minutes to fill out the survey at the end, and please follow Ralph on his LinkedIn and as well as the LCI on our Twitter and Facebook and our website. And thanks to everyone for calling in, and let's have a lean, productive afternoon for the rest of the afternoon. So thanks again to everybody, and we'll close it up at that. So again, please give an opportunity there to fill in, to give your feedback, so we can continuously improve. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Kevin.